Küresel jeopolitikte kritik yıllara girildi. Birleşik Devletler'le Çin arasındaki büyük güç rekabetinde koridorların önemi artarken bu noktada Orta Koridor öne çıkıyor. Jeopolitik gelişmeler Türkiye'nin Orta Koridor'daki rolünü güçlendirirken Washington ve diğer batı başkentlerinde Türkiye'nin Akdeniz'den Orta Asya'ya kadar uzanan geniş bir coğrafyada artan stratejik önemine sıkça dikkat çekiliyor. Birleşik Devletler Kongresi'ne yakınlığıyla bilinen Heritage Foundation'ın uluslararası ilişkiler ve güvenlik kıdemli uzmanı Carafano ile konuştuk.
From the U.S. perspective and from many of our allies' perspective, the U.S. is a global power with global interests and global responsibilities. Well, the parts that connect the world together, they're important to us. We'd like for them to be at peace and stable. Western Europe, the greater Middle East, the Indo-Pacific, these are the great lily pads that connect the world. Turkey is in the center of the universe, right? Turkey is crucial to the peace and security and stability in Europe because it's the great linchpin. And it sits right in the middle of the great connector, right? The southern corridor, the bridge to the Indo-Pacific. So few countries are strategically more in the middle of the mix than Turkey. It's in Turkey's interest that the Black Sea be free and open to commercial traffic. It's in Turkey's interest that the Med be stable. It's in Turkey's interest that the Turkish economy rebounds and becomes really strong. And part of that's going to be through trade and investment. And so they're going to need connectivity in the region. They're going to need greater economic engagement with the United States and Europe. So I think all these developments are really advantage Turkey. And I think right now that's really needed because the most important thing for Turkey is to get the Turkish economy really moving and delivering for the Turkish people.
Given its growing influence, as you said, in the region and especially in the Eastern Mediterranean, Black Sea, and even with Turkic countries in the Central Asia, and considering that U.S. has a similar approach to the Central Asia, like C5+1. So how vital Turkey's role in alliance?
Well, obviously Turkey is absolutely vital to NATO, and NATO is vital to Turkey, right? Turkey sits in a place that's only been strategic since the dawn of time, right? It's always been the crossroads of every civilization and empire. So Turkey's always going to be important, and NATO brings much to Turkey. It brings that regional stability that Turkey can really depend on. So Turkey's place in NATO is important for Turkey, and it's important for NATO. I think that's a very strong relationship. I would say, when you look at the great corridors that unite the world, which actually haven't changed since time immemorial, right? So there's the northern corridor, you go over atop of Russia into Western Europe. There's the middle corridor through Central Asia and the Caucasus into the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Europe, what we often call the middle corridor. And then there's the southern corridor. You go through the Indo-Pacific, across the Suez Canal into the... All right, the northern corridor is dead. Nobody's going to use the northern corridor because the Russians are never going to be back in people's good graces anytime soon. So I don't think that's a major economic corridor in our lifetime. The southern corridor is going to remain free and open. China's never going to be able to dominate that, and so it's going to be important. So the wild card here is the central corridor, and the central corridor is no longer about linking China to the West. The central corridor is about linking Central Asia to the rest of the world. You cannot build a central corridor without Turkey, whether it's Turkey's role as a leader in the Organization of Turkic States, or the Turkish private sector, which knows the region, knows how to bring business to the table, knows how to build things, right? Has very strong relationships in Central Asia, in Azerbaijan. I can't see how there's ever a central corridor without Turkey's active role and participation. And if there is a central corridor, I think that's a game changer. You're bringing all of the Central Asian energy onto the market. You're bringing other potential sources of raw materials and mining onto the market. You're also creating an opportunity for manufacturing and additive supply chains, because all these countries could be manufacturing bases. They actually have a very, very good industrial base. Other countries in the region could have that as well. And I think there's a lot of natural partnerships with the West. But all this really hinges on the role of Turkey in this.
Yeah. Given all these facts you just mentioned, how can the United States and Turkey collaborate in that region?
Well, so there's two things. One is I think the United States has to look at the world differently. So we tend to think of Eurasia as this big amorphous blob, right? Because during the Cold War, it was all very mysterious. It was behind the Iron Curtain. And even after the Cold War, we just didn't pay attention to it because we didn't really need to. But now, if you think about it, this is all largely post-Soviet space, right? These were areas that were dominated militarily, economically, politically by Russia, Central Europe, Southern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. All that space is opening up because Russian influence is in retreat. Chinese influence really isn't replacing it in dominance because people just don't trust the Chinese, and they really don't want to do business with the Chinese if they don't have to. So the United States has to stop looking at this amorphous blob, and we have to start looking at it from the perspective of the people that live in the region and working with them. Turkey's a natural partner for that. So I think the United States has to be really deeply engaged in thinking about engagement in the Caucasus, in Southern Europe, in Central Europe, things like the Three Seas Initiative, and in Central Asia.
When it comes to Black Sea, Mr. Carafano, Turkey is acting a balancing power between West and Russia. Yeah. Turkey is the only NATO member who is able to speak to Moscow. At the same time, Turkey condemning Russia invasion of Ukraine and the Crimea, annexation of Crimea. Right. So what do you think of Turkey's balancing role in the region between Russia and the West?
I do think that Turkey has delivered. They delivered on membership for Finland and Sweden. They've delivered on support for Ukraine. Mm-hmm. They've delivered on being, I think, a constructive voice in dealing with Russia. Mm-hmm. They've delivered on their commitments to NATO. I think Turkey has played an important role in ameliorating competition in the Black Sea. I think the future of further development it's in the littoral nations in the Black Sea, some of which are NATO members, that really need to build up their own capacity and capability to secure their waters and to defend free and open travel. One of the outcomes of the war is NATO has developed these regional defense plans. These, I think, are incredibly important because they cover everybody in NATO.
When it comes to China and the great power competition between the United States and China, the Indo-Pacific region is warming up. But it is not happening only in the Indo-Pacific region. In Africa and in Middle East, we can see that. So how do you describe the great power competition in Africa, in Middle East, and maybe in
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I often tell people that China's has global influence and power. And if you don't deal with that, so you can't just deal with China in the Indo-Pacific. I think, like I said, I think in Africa we need to partner to deal with a lot of the destabilizing influence with the Russians and the Chinese. I actually think that Israel and all its Arab neighbors and Turkey are working in what really tips the balance is Central Asia. You bring Central Asia energy into the equation, and now you're really outpacing these. And the other thing is, if you think about this, is not just Central Asia with the Caucasus and all the post-Soviet states. And I'm not saying that they're in the Western sphere of influence. I'm just saying that they're not under control of other countries and they can do business for themselves and protect themselves. Mm-hmm. Then what's happening is you're essentially creating free and open spaces, right? It's not you're creating our sphere of influence or their sphere of influence, but you're creating free and open spaces. And what are you doing? You're pushing Russia and Iran and China further apart. Not in the sense of you're containing them, but you're denying them space to meddle in. And so if your country is building its economy and governance it's not an easy target. And it can do business with whoever it wants. And I think in the end, people are just not going to want to do business with China because all China wants is to take out. They don't want to bring in. Any country that has a choice is going to pick a different partner.
James Carafano from Heritage Foundation, thank you very much for your time and joining us on TRT News.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.